The Liberals listen to pot smokers who want a bigger joint and a better reefer.
In a country like Canada, it is unacceptable that senior citizens would be subjected to poverty and squalor during their retirement years, and it calls on all of us as parliamentarians to do what we can to provide opportunities for people to save their money for their retirement years. The question is, there needs to be the vehicles for Canadians to be able to invest and to save in a well-administered, safe plan. Whatever that plan would be is not in this bill. This is the first steps of a Bill of Rights that would start to establish the goals that I think governments should have. So I want to take a moment to underscore that final point because it may be one of the most important. Bill C-513 will set out in law the goals, and I'm talking goals only here, to which we should aspire legislatively as they relate to retirement income. It would legally compel both this federal government and future governments to take real action to promote, enhance, and preserve retirement income security, coverage, and adequacy. For years, successive governments have set out their plans to help enhance pensions in Canada, but they have done so without any sort of long-term map. Bill C-513 can be that roadmap. This Bill of Rights, as I indicated, is for pension income. It recognizes that a strong retirement income system is essential to the well-being of Canadians and to the overall health of our economy. It recognizes that the Canadian retirement income system is built on a combination of personal, public, and private options. It affirms that we have the right to a retirement income system that promotes adequacy, transparency, affordability, and equity. And it also enshrines these principles in law while respecting Parliament's constitutional limitations. So to me and to the hundreds of pensioners with whom I have consulted, pension reform is fundamental as motherhood. Canadian seniors, particularly the 300,000 that now live below the line of poverty, are tired of struggling to make ends meet and don't want their families and their kids to have to do the same thing. Seniors should not be forced to decide between medicine and food or shelter and heat. And unfortunately, we do have certain seniors, because of various reasons, that are in that situation. And I don't think any of us in this House want to see that continue. After all, today's seniors are yesterday's labor force, yesterday's caregivers, and yesterday's builders of the economy. So if we're going to talk about consumers today, we need to remember to look beyond their current spending abilities. They carried this country through wars, depression, and countless other times of difficulty, and they did it while working to raise a family, while building the social programs that we so value today. But they deserve better than to be relegated to a life of poverty, and it is within our power to give them and their children what they deserve. Compassion, consideration, and respect are terms that go hand in glove with retirement income security, coverage, and adequacy. The provisions of Bill C-513 already have the endorsement of several groups, such as the Canadian Medical Association and the Canadian Federation of Pensioners. These groups are not supporting this effort because they are liberal. They are supporting it because they too believe that the security of the pension promise is paramount. I've spoken to many members of this House on this subject, and I've come to believe that this notion is one that really unites all of us. We have differences on how to arrive at the destination, but the end goal should be the same. Bill C-513 offers us the freedom to pursue our own legislative paths, so long as the outcome is one that enhances pension security for all. So as I said, I have traveled across the country and I've spoken to many on this subject, and sadly most are not adequately saving for retirement. This truth clearly requires foresight and leadership on the part of all of us and the government. Clearly, we have learned that there is a need for a long-term roadmap for pension reform so that in the next 20 years, when people retire, they have adequate income?
First of all, we established on October the 1st as National Seniors Day so that people across Canada can pay tribute to the seniors who have helped build our country and continue to help make Canada great. This is where our government and the Liberal Party differ. While we take concrete action, the Liberals make empty proposals. While we take positive action to benefit Canadians, the Liberals put forward hollow bills in a cynical attempt to win votes. Bill 513 is simply a gimmick, a sham. The bill would apply to less than 10% of pension plans in Canada, and the Liberals know it. It also unnecessarily duplicates existing pieces in federal legislation. Simply put, the private member's bill, sponsored by the member from York West, is not in the best interest of Canadian seniors, and for that reason, we oppose it. We take the pension system very seriously. We take the economy seriously, and we will continue to ensure greater financial security for seniors and prosperity for all Canadians. Thank you.
I rise today to speak to Bill C-513, the so-called Retirement Income Bill of Rights. As I'll describe in greater detail later, I have very serious reservations about supporting this bill, even at this stage, but on balance believe that it is more important that the bill be sent to committee for careful scrutiny than it is to vote against this bill at the time. The stated goal, as the member for York West noted, is to enshrine in law the notion that all Canadians have the right to contribute to a decent retirement plan. Unfortunately, this Liberal bill contains some very vague declarations and half measures that we will not oppose, but does very little to actually improve the retirement security of Canadians. So let me turn to this bill. The title, Retirement Income Bill of Rights, is very misleading. The bill only addresses certain features of the retirement income system. It purports, as the member said, to promote certain goals like adequacy, transparency, affordability, and so forth. But it's entirely unclear just how those goals will be achieved. To call it a Bill of Rights is misleading in the extreme. What does it mean? Well, as a lawyer, I must point out that this is no Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It has no constitutional force. It has no way to render an inconsistent regulation or bill of no force and effect, as the Charter can do under our Constitution. So it is rhetoric. To call it a Bill of Rights, or in French, une déclaration de droit, is misleading in the extreme. Empty rhetoric. If it enacted, it's just going to be another statute. It might have some interpretive force, but for reasons I'll describe, it's hard to believe it will have any real impact. The bill is also very badly drafted. Sometimes it says every individual has the right, then it says every individual must have the right. In French, it only says tout individu a le droit. Why are there differences in drafting? It's of no particular force and effect. Lawyers are going to have a field day with this bill as it's currently drafted. A couple of the sections are entirely superfluous. It says it applies to Canadian legislative authority, the legislative authority of the Parliament of Canada. Well, obviously that's the case. Why put a section in? There really are only 9 substantive sections at all in this bill. Let me turn to the first of them. Section 4 says every individual has the right to accumulate sufficient pension income, to provide for, it says, a lifestyle in retirement that the individual considers adequate. What does that mean? It's an entirely subjective standard. If I believe I have a right to a Rolls-Royce pension in my retirement, what does this bill say about that? It's my belief, it seems to say, that counts. Moreover, the bill goes on to say even that right is subject to, and I quote, any reasonable restrictions imposed by a federal law, except those restrictions can't be based on such personal characteristics as age, sex, national origin, or occupation. Now, most of those things are already covered and have long been covered by the Canadian Human Rights Act. So they make no difference, change nothing. As for the occupation, I have a lot of trouble understanding what that would mean. Isn't it obvious that one's occupation will determine in part the extent of one's retirement income? Is that not a reasonable restriction? If one person's a CEO and another person's a cashier, isn't their respective occupations reasonable restrictions on their retirement income? According to this bill, as I read it, that's not the case, and so I don't know what it means. How much longer? Section 5, it talks about how an individual can determine how and when to accumulate pension income. Except that an individual, it says, who participates in the workplace plan may be required by that plan to save for retirement. How does that change the status quo, Mr. Speaker? Does it simply prohibit an employer from forbidding workplace pension plans? If so, it may be of very little value indeed. Section 7 requires retirement income plans to provide a full and accurate, timely disclosure of all material risks. Presumably, if consumer protection legislation to that effect doesn't already exist, that may be of some value. Section 8, it codifies common law. All it says is those providing investment advice can't have a conflict of interest. Well, I assure you, Mr. Speaker, that's pretty well standard in the industry. It's hard to believe that adds any value. It goes on to say a number of things about training and financial literacy that are all very useful, I suppose. But greater clarity would be achieved if the laws that they're talking about were actually amended themselves, rather than putting pious statements in this other bill. So this bill makes very little of substance that really would address why Canadians are struggling to save for their retirement. Portions of the bill refer to transparency of plans and access to information. That's certainly helpful. But it's regrettable that the bill is mostly made up of grandiose proclamations of retirement rights, which will do very little to change real people's lives.